The bitter December wind cut through the empty streets like a knife, carrying with it the promise of the harshest Christmas Eve in years. Snow fell in thick, heavy flakes, covering the city in a blanket of white that should have been beautiful but instead felt suffocating. Most people were tucked safely in their warm homes, wrapping last-minute gifts and preparing for tomorrow's celebrations. But not everyone had that luxury. Benjamin Carter pulled his wool coat tighter around his shoulders as he walked the deserted sidewalk, his expensive Italian leather shoes crunching softly in the fresh snow. At 45 he had built Carter Industries into a billion-dollar empire, but tonight he felt more alone than ever. His penthouse apartment, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and designer furniture, had felt like a prison. He needed air, needed to walk, needed to escape the suffocating weight of another Christmas spent entirely by himself. That's when he saw her. At first, Benjamin thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. Surely what he was seeing couldn't be real. But as he moved closer, the horrifying truth became undeniable. There, behind the old brick building that housed Murphy's Corner store, a small figure was hunched over a dumpster. The figure was tiny, impossibly small, and was digging through garbage bags with desperate intensity. As Benjamin got closer, he could see it was a little girl, probably no more than 8 or 9 years old. Her small hands, red and raw from the cold, pulled at plastic bags and cardboard boxes, searching for something. Her coat, if it could even be called that, was nothing more than a thin jacket with holes in the elbows and a broken zipper. Her feet, Benjamin realized with a jolt of horror, were bare except for a pair of worn sneakers with holes so big her toes were visible through them. The snow was falling harder now, accumulating on her shoulders and in her hair. She didn't seem to notice or care. She just kept digging, kept searching, with the focused determination of someone who knew that finding something, anything, might mean the difference between surviving the night and not. Have you ever seen something so heartbreaking that it changed the entire course of your life? Something that made you question everything you thought you knew about the world? Please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below, because what happens next will restore your faith in humanity, but only if we spread this message of hope together. Benjamin stood frozen for a moment, his mind struggling to process what he was witnessing. This was Christmas Eve. This was supposed to be a night of warmth and joy and family gatherings. Children were supposed to be sleeping peacefully in their beds, dreaming of Santa Claus and presents under the tree. They were not supposed to be digging through trash, alone in the snow looking for food scraps. "Hey," Benjamin called out softly, not wanting to startle her. "Hey there, sweetheart." The little girl's head snapped up, and Benjamin felt his heart break completely. Her face was thin, almost gaunt, with high cheekbones that spoke of hunger rather than genetics. Her dark eyes were huge in her small face, wide with fear and exhaustion. She had the most beautiful brown skin, but it was ashen with cold, and her lips had a bluish tint that Benjamin recognized as the beginning stages of hypothermia. For a moment they just stared at each other. The girl looked ready to run, every muscle in her small body tensed for flight. Benjamin raised his hands slowly, the way someone might approach a frightened animal. "It's okay," he said gently. "I'm not going to hurt you. What are you doing out here, honey? Where are your parents?" The girl didn't answer immediately. She clutched a crumpled piece of what looked like bread crust in one hand, probably something she'd found in the garbage. With her other hand, she wiped her nose on her torn sleeve. "I'm looking for dinner," she said finally, her voice so small Benjamin had to strain to hear it over the wind. Sometimes people throw away good food. Not spoiled food, just food they don't want. Benjamin felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. "Where do you live, sweetheart? Where's your family?" "Don't have one," the girl said matter-of-factly, as if she were commenting on the weather. "Just me now." "What's your name?" "Amara," she whispered. "That's a beautiful name," Benjamin said and meant it. "Amara, I'm Benjamin. And I think you and I need to get you somewhere warm right now. Would that be okay?" Amara looked at him suspiciously. "You're not going to call the police, are you? Or social services? They want to put me in a home with strangers. I don't want to go with strangers." "No police," Benjamin promised, though he knew that eventually, they'd have to involve the proper authorities. But not tonight. Tonight was about getting this child warm and fed and safe. Just somewhere warm. There's a diner about 3 blocks from here. They'll have hot food and hot chocolate. Would you like that? Amara's eyes lit up for the first time, and Benjamin caught a glimpse of what this little girl might look like when she wasn't cold and scared and hungry. She was beautiful, with an intelligence in her eyes that suggested she was far older than her years in some ways, yet still so heartbreakingly young in others. "Hot chocolate?" she asked as if the words were foreign to her. "With marshmallows?" Benjamin confirmed. And whipped cream if you want it. Amara looked down at the piece of bread crust in her hand, then back at Benjamin. She seemed to be weighing her options, calculating risks and benefits with the survival instinct of someone who had learned too young that the world was not a safe place. Finally she nodded. Benjamin wanted to pick her up, to carry her away from this awful place and shield her from the cold, but he sensed that would be too much too fast. Instead, he took off his expensive wool coat and gently draped it around her tiny shoulders. It was so big on her that it dragged on the ground, but it was warm and dry. Better? He asked. Amara nodded again, pulling the coat tighter around herself. Together they began walking toward the diner, their footsteps muffled by the snow. With each step, Benjamin found himself making silent promises to this little girl walking beside him. He didn't know what had brought her to this place, didn't know what circumstances had led to her being alone on the streets on Christmas Eve, but he knew one thing for certain. He was not going to let her spend another night in the cold. Not if he could help it. Not ever again. As they approached the warm glow of the diner's windows, Benjamin realized that his own problems, his own loneliness, his own emptiness, seemed insignificant compared to what this little girl had endured. Maybe, just maybe, they had found each other for a reason. Maybe this chance encounter on a snowy Christmas Eve was the beginning of something neither of them had even dared to hope for. A real family. The warmth of Murphy's all-night diner hit them like a wall as soon as Benjamin pushed open the glass door. The smell of coffee, bacon, and fresh bread filled the air, and the soft yellow light from the overhead fixtures created a cozy atmosphere that was a stark contrast to the harsh cold they'd just escaped. A few late-night customers sat scattered throughout the red vinyl booths, but the place was mostly empty, which Benjamin was grateful for. He didn't want Amara to feel like she was being stared at. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a ponytail, looked up from wiping down the counter. Her name tag read Dolores, and when she saw Benjamin and the tiny figure wrapped in his oversized coat, her expression immediately softened with understanding rather than judgment. "Evening, folks," she said warmly. "Cold night to be out walking. Why don't you take that corner booth there? It's nice and warm." Benjamin guided Amara to the booth Dolores had indicated, helping her slide across the vinyl seat. The coat was so big on her that she was practically swimming in it, but Benjamin could see that she was already starting to thaw out. The bluish tint was leaving her lips, and some color was returning to her cheeks. "Now then," Dolores said, approaching their table with two menus, "what can I get you folks started with?" "Some hot coffee. Hot chocolate maybe?" "Hot chocolate for the lady," Benjamin said, smiling at Amara. "With marshmallows and whipped cream. And coffee for me, please." "Coming right up," Dolores said, and Benjamin could tell from her tone that she understood this wasn't just any ordinary late-night customer situation. She'd probably seen enough in her years working the graveyard shift to recognize when someone needed extra kindness. While they waited for their drinks, Benjamin studied Amara more carefully. Now that they were in good light and she wasn't shivering, he could see that she was probably closer to 8 years old rather than 9, though it was hard to tell. Malnutrition could stunt growth and she was definitely underweight. Her hair, which was a beautiful dark brown with natural curl, was matted and dirty, but he could see that with proper care it would be gorgeous. Her clothes, what little she had on under his coat, were clearly hand-me-downs that had seen better days. But it was her eyes that struck him most. They were old eyes in a young face, eyes that had seen too much and understood too much about how cruel the world could be. Yet there was still something there, some spark of hope or resilience that hadn't been completely extinguished. Dolores returned with their drinks, setting a large mug of hot chocolate in front of Amara and a cup of coffee in front of Benjamin. The hot chocolate was piled high with marshmallows and whipped cream, exactly as promised, and Amara's eyes went wide at the sight of it. "Take your time, honey," Dolores said gently. "And when you're ready we've got some nice hot soup and fresh bread. On the house." Benjamin started to object, to insist on paying, but Dolores gave him a look that said this was her gift to give, and he nodded his thanks instead. Amara wrapped her small hands around the mug, holding it close to her face and breathing in the steam. When she took her first sip, her eyes closed in what looked like pure bliss. Benjamin had to swallow hard around the lump in his throat. "Good?" he asked. "It's the best thing I ever tasted," Amara said seriously, and Benjamin believed her. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes while Amara worked on her hot chocolate. Benjamin didn't want to push her, didn't want to overwhelm her with questions, but he needed to understand her situation if he was going to help her properly. "Amara," he said finally, "can you tell me a little bit about yourself? How long have you been on your own?" Amara looked up from her mug, studying his face carefully. Benjamin had the distinct impression that she was trying to decide whether or not she could trust him. Finally, she seemed to reach a decision. "My grandmama died 4 months ago," she said simply. "She was taking care of me since I was little because my mama died when I was born and I never had a daddy. Grandmama was sick for a long time, but she tried to hide it from me. When she went to the hospital, they said I had to go stay with a family until she got better. But she didn't get better." Benjamin felt his chest tighten. "What happened after that?" "The people I was staying with, they were nice enough, but they had their own kids and not much money. When they found out grandmama wasn't coming back, they said they couldn't keep me. They were going to call social services, but I heard them talking about foster homes and how sometimes kids get split up and moved around a lot." Amara took another sip of her hot chocolate. "I got scared. So I ran away." 4 months ago?" Benjamin asked, trying to keep his voice calm even though inside he was horrified. "You've been living on the streets for 4 months?" Amara nodded. "It's not so bad in the summer. There are places to hide where it's warm and people throw away good food all the time. But winter is harder." Benjamin couldn't believe what he was hearing. This little girl, this tiny, brave, incredible little girl, had been surviving on her own for 4 months. She was 8 years old. Most 8-year-olds couldn't handle being left alone for 4 hours, let alone 4 months. "Where do you sleep?" he asked. "Different places. Sometimes there are buildings with warm air coming out of vents. Sometimes I can find cardboard boxes that keep the wind out. One time I found an old car that wasn't locked, and I slept in that for 3 days until someone found me and chased me away." Each word was like a knife to Benjamin's heart. "Amara, honey, you know that's not safe, right? You're just a little girl. You shouldn't have to live like that." "I know," she said quietly. "But I don't want to go to a foster home where they don't want me and might send me somewhere else. At least this way, I'm in charge of what happens to me." Benjamin understood her reasoning even though it broke his heart. She'd lost everyone she'd ever loved, everyone who had ever taken care of her, and her response was to take control of her own survival rather than risk being hurt again by trusting someone new. It was both admirable and tragic. Dolores returned with a bowl of chicken noodle soup and a basket of fresh bread, setting them in front of Amara with the same gentle kindness she'd shown before. "Eat up, sweetheart," she said. "There's plenty more where that came from." Amara looked at the food like it was a treasure, then up at Benjamin as if asking permission. When he nodded encouragingly, she began to eat with careful, precise bites, trying not to appear too eager even though Benjamin could tell she was probably hungrier than she'd been in weeks. "Amara," Benjamin said carefully, "what if I told you there might be another option? Something better than foster care, but also better than living on the streets." She looked up from her soup, chewing thoughtfully. "What kind of option?" "What if you could stay somewhere safe and warm while we figured out the best situation for you? Somewhere with people who actually care about what happens to you." "You mean like with you?" she asked, and the hope in her voice was so tentative, so fragile, that Benjamin wanted to promise her the world right then and there. "Maybe," he said honestly. "I'd have to make some calls, talk to some people, make sure everything is done properly. But yes, maybe like with me at least for now." Amara set down her spoon and looked at him seriously. "Why would you want to help me? You don't even know me." It was a fair question, and Benjamin found himself thinking carefully about his answer. Why did he want to help her? Yes, because she was a child in need, because it was the right thing to do, because no one should have to live the way she'd been living. But it was more than that too. Because, he said finally, "I think maybe we need each other. I've been alone for a long time too, Amara. Not the same way you have, but alone. And maybe if you're willing to take a chance on me, we could both be a little less alone." Amara studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. "I'll take a chance on you if you take a chance on me." Benjamin reached across the table and gently squeezed her small hand. "Deal," he said, and meant it with everything in his heart. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the snow from the previous night having left the city looking like a winter wonderland. Benjamin had taken Amara to the Marriott downtown, getting her a suite connected to his own room so she could have privacy but he could still keep an eye on her. She had slept for 12 straight hours, something that told him more about her recent living conditions than any words could have. Now, as she sat at the room service table eating pancakes with more syrup than was probably advisable, Benjamin was on the phone with his lawyer, trying to navigate the complex world of emergency custody and child welfare laws. "Ben, I understand your heart is in the right place," Thomas Richardson was saying on the other end of the line. "But you can't just take in a homeless child without going through proper channels. There are laws, procedures. If someone reports this and it looks like you're harboring a runaway, you could be in serious legal trouble." Benjamin watched Amara carefully stack her pancakes, completely absorbed in the task. She was wearing new clothes they'd bought early that morning, jeans and a soft pink sweater that made her look like the little girl she was, rather than the street-smart survivor she'd been forced to become. So what do I do, Tom? I can't just turn her over to social services and walk away. She's terrified of the system, and honestly, after hearing her story, I can understand why. The first step is to contact Child Protective Services yourself, Tom explained. Be proactive about it. Explain the situation, explain that you found her and want to help. They'll appreciate your honesty, and it shows you're trying to do things the right way. And then what? They take her away and put her in some group home? Not necessarily. If you're serious about wanting to provide care for her, even temporarily, they can do an emergency placement evaluation. It's not adoption and it's not permanent, but it would allow her to stay with you legally while they work on finding a more permanent solution. Benjamin felt a small surge of hope. How long does that take? The emergency evaluation? A few days, assuming your background check comes back clean, which I'm sure it will. The home study might take a bit longer, but given your resources and the fact that you're voluntarily stepping forward, I think they'll fast-track it. Okay, Benjamin said, feeling better about the situation. Set up a meeting. The sooner the better. After he hung up, Amara looked up from her pancakes. Are you going to send me away now? She asked quietly. Benjamin's heart clenched. No, sweetheart. I'm trying to make sure you can stay with me legally so no one can take you away. But to do that, we need to talk to some people who help children just to make sure everything is done properly. Social workers, Amara said, and it wasn't a question. Yes, but good ones, Amara. People whose job it is to make sure kids like you are safe and happy. And I'll be there with you the whole time, okay? I'm not going anywhere. 3 hours later, they were sitting in the offices of the Department of Children and Families, waiting to meet with a social worker. Benjamin had used his connections to get an emergency appointment, something that normally would have taken weeks. Amara sat beside him, holding his hand tightly, wearing a brave expression that didn't quite hide her underlying fear. Mr. Carter? Amara? A woman appeared in the doorway, smiling warmly. She was African American, probably in her late 30s, with kind eyes and a professional but approachable demeanor. I'm Patricia Thompson, but you can call me Miss Patty. Would you like to come back to my office? Patricia's office was bright and cheerful, with children's drawings on the walls and a small table with crayons and coloring books. It was clearly designed to be non-intimidating for young visitors. She gestured for them to sit on a comfortable couch rather than the formal chairs in front of her desk. So, Patricia said, settling into a chair across from them, I understand we have an unusual situation here. Amara, honey, are you doing okay? Are you comfortable talking to me? Amara nodded but moved a little closer to Benjamin on the couch. That's fine, Patricia said easily. Mr. Carter, why don't you start by telling me how you and Amara met? Benjamin told the story of finding Amara behind the diner, his voice steady but his emotions clearly engaged. Patricia listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a pad of paper. When he finished, she turned to Amara. Amara, is that how you remember it happening too? Yes, ma'am, Amara said politely. And how are you feeling about staying with Mr. Carter? Do you feel safe with him? Yes, ma'am. He's been really nice to me. He got me warm clothes and let me take a bath with real shampoo and everything. And he doesn't yell or get mad. Patricia smiled. That's good to hear. Now, I need to ask you some questions about before you met Mr. Carter. Is that okay? For the next hour, Patricia gently questioned Amara about her life with her grandmother, the family she'd briefly stayed with, and her months on the streets. She was skilled at drawing information out without making it feel like an interrogation, and gradually Amara began to relax and open up. You're a very brave girl, Amara, Patricia said when they were finished. And very smart. You did a good job taking care of yourself, but I'm glad you don't have to do that anymore. She turned to Benjamin. Mr. Carter, I appreciate you bringing this situation to our attention voluntarily. It shows good faith and genuine concern for Amara's welfare. Based on what I've heard today, I'm going to recommend emergency temporary custody placement with you while we work on a more permanent solution. Benjamin felt a wave of relief wash over him. However, Patricia continued, there are conditions. We'll need to do a background check, which I'm sure will be fine. We'll need to do a home safety inspection. And you'll need to understand that this is temporary. Our goal is always to find permanent, stable homes for children in Amara's situation. I understand, Benjamin said. And I want what's best for Amara, whether that's with me or with someone else. Good. Now there's one more thing we need to discuss. Patricia looked at both of them seriously. Amara, honey, you've been through a lot, and it's perfectly normal for children in your situation to have some emotional challenges as they adjust to a new life. We're going to set you up with a counselor, someone you can talk to about your feelings. Would that be okay? Amara looked uncertain. Do I have to? Let's try it and see how it goes, Patricia said gently. Sometimes it helps to talk to someone who isn't involved in your daily life, someone who can help you work through all the changes you're experiencing. By the time they left the DCF offices, Benjamin felt cautiously optimistic. The background check would take 48 hours, the home inspection was scheduled for the next day, and Patricia had given them a list of child therapists who specialized in trauma and abandonment issues. As they walked back to the car, Amara slipped her hand into his. Mr. Benjamin? Yes, sweetheart. Thank you for not giving up on me. Benjamin squeezed her small hand gently. Thank you for trusting me, Amara. We're going to figure this out together, okay? Okay, she said, and for the first time since he'd found her, Benjamin heard something in her voice that sounded like real hope. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Benjamin's penthouse apartment had never hosted a child before, and he quickly discovered that making a home child-friendly required more than just buying a few toys. Safety latches, outlet covers, and rearranging furniture to eliminate sharp corners were just the beginning. He found himself enjoying the process, though, seeing his sterile, adult-focused space slowly transform into something warmer and more welcoming. Amara approached each new experience with a mixture of wonder and caution that both delighted and broke Benjamin's heart. The first time she took a real bath in his marble bathroom with bubbles and bath toys he'd hastily purchased, she spent nearly an hour in the water, marveling at the luxury of unlimited hot water and soap that smelled like flowers. When he showed her to the bedroom he'd set up for her, complete with a canopy bed and more stuffed animals than any one child could possibly need, she stood in the doorway for a full 5 minutes before tentatively entering. Is this really all for me? She'd whispered, touching the soft pink comforter with reverent fingers. All for you, Benjamin had confirmed, and the smile that lit up her face was worth more than all the money he'd spent. The home inspection had gone smoothly. Patricia had arrived with a clipboard and a thorough but friendly demeanor, checking everything from fire safety to food storage to the secure locks on the balcony doors 20 floors up. She'd also observed Benjamin and Amara interacting, watching how they communicated and how comfortable they seemed with each other. You're a natural at this, she told Benjamin quietly while Amara was in her room playing with her new art supplies. Some people think providing for a child is just about money and resources, but you understand it's about emotional availability too. The background check had come back clean as expected, and Benjamin was now officially Amara's temporary guardian. It felt both thrilling and terrifying. He was responsible for another human being, a small, fragile, incredibly resilient human being who was depending on him to keep her safe and help her heal. On their 4th morning together, Benjamin woke to find Amara already up, sitting by the floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room, watching the city wake up below. She was wearing the soft pajamas they'd picked out together, her hair neat and shiny from the previous night's bath, looking like any other 8-year-old girl on a winter morning. Except for her eyes, which still held that too-old awareness that came from having to survive on her own. Good morning, sweetheart, he said, settling into the chair beside her. Did you sleep okay? Yes, sir, she said politely. The bed is really comfortable. And it's warm in here. Benjamin smiled. You don't have to call me sir, Amara. Benjamin is fine. Or Ben if you prefer. She nodded but didn't change her formal tone. Benjamin was learning that Amara's politeness was partly good manners taught by her grandmother, but also partly a protective mechanism. If she was always polite, always grateful, always good, then maybe people wouldn't abandon her. What would you like for breakfast? He asked. We could make pancakes again, or there's cereal, or I could ask the concierge to send up some fresh pastries from that bakery downstairs. Whatever you want is fine, Amara said automatically. This was another pattern Benjamin had noticed. Amara never expressed preferences, never made requests, never complained about anything. She accepted whatever was offered with gratitude, as if she was afraid that having opinions or desires might be too much trouble and cause him to change his mind about helping her. Amara, he said gently, part of being in a family is that everyone gets to have opinions about things. I really want to know what you'd like for breakfast. She looked at him uncertainly. Pancakes are really good. But only if it's not too much trouble. Pancakes are never too much trouble, Benjamin assured her, and was rewarded with one of her rare, genuine smiles. As they cooked breakfast together, Amara slowly began to open up. She told him about her grandmother who had worked 2 jobs to support them but always made time to help Amara with her homework. She talked about school, which she missed terribly, especially reading time in art class. She mentioned friends she'd had to leave behind when she ran away, her voice wistful but accepting. "Grandmama always said I was smart," she confided as she carefully measured flour for the pancakes. "She said I could be anything I wanted when I grew up, maybe even go to college someday." "Your grandmother was absolutely right," Benjamin said firmly. "You are incredibly smart, Amara. And you're definitely going to college someday if that's what you want." After breakfast, Benjamin had a proposal. "I was thinking we could go shopping today. Not for necessities this time, but for fun things. Books, art supplies, maybe some games we could play together. What do you think?" Amara's eyes lit up. "Books? As many books as you want," Benjamin promised. Can you imagine the pure joy of a child who loves to read but hasn't had access to books for months? That's exactly what Benjamin witnessed when they arrived at the large bookstore downtown. Amara moved through the children's section like she was exploring a treasure cave, running her fingers along the spines of books, pulling out titles and reading the back covers with intense concentration. She was so absorbed that she didn't notice the store was about to close until Benjamin gently reminded her it was time to go. Their arms were full of books, art supplies, puzzles, and board games by the time they returned to the apartment. As they unpacked their purchases, Amara suddenly stopped and looked at Benjamin seriously. "Why are you being so nice to me?" she asked. "I mean, really, why?" Benjamin sat down on the floor beside her, considering his answer carefully. "Do you remember what I told you that first night? About how I've been alone for a long time too?" She nodded. "Well, I meant that. I have a big apartment and a successful business and more money than I know what to do with, but I didn't have anyone to share it with. I didn't have anyone to make pancakes for or buy books for or worry about when they're out of my sight. Having you here, it makes me feel like I have a purpose beyond just making more money." Amara considered this seriously. "So I'm helping you too?" "You're helping me more than you know," Benjamin said honestly. "You're teaching me what it means to care about someone else's happiness more than my own." That evening, as they sat together on the couch reading their new books, Amara suddenly closed hers and looked at Benjamin with an expression that seemed far too mature for her 8 years. "Benjamin," she said quietly. "Yes, sweetheart? I know this is just temporary. Miss Patty explained that you're not adopting me, that you're just taking care of me until they find me a real family. And that's okay. I just want you to know that even if this ends, these have been the best days of my whole life." Benjamin felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Amara, listen to me. Whatever happens in the future, whatever decisions get made about where you live permanently, you will always be important to me. Always. And wherever you end up, I want to be part of your life if you'll let me. Maybe not as your guardian, but as your friend, as someone who cares about you. Okay?" Amara nodded, but Benjamin could see the worry in her eyes, the fear that this happiness was too good to last. He made a silent promise to himself that whatever happened, he would make sure Amara never felt abandoned again. Later that night, after Amara had gone to bed, Benjamin called Patricia to check on the progress of finding a permanent placement. "I've been thinking about that," Patricia said. "I have a couple in mind who might be perfect for Amara. James and Angela Thompson. They've been trying to adopt for 3 years, and they specifically requested a child Amara's age. They're both professionals, both African American, which might help Amara feel more culturally connected. And most importantly, they've been through extensive training and preparation." "Tell me about them," Benjamin said. "James is an elementary school teacher, which means he's great with kids Amara's age. Angela is a pediatric nurse. They have a house in a good neighborhood with excellent schools. They've been waiting for the right match, and from what I know about Amara, I think this could be it." Benjamin felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that there might be a wonderful family for Amara, but also a surprising stab of loss at the thought of her leaving. When would they meet her? "I'd like to set up an initial meeting for next week, if you think Amara is ready. Just a casual get-together, maybe over lunch, so everyone can get to know each other without pressure." After he hung up, Benjamin found himself staring out at the city lights, thinking about how much his life had changed in just a few days. He'd gone from a lonely businessman going through the motions of living to someone who had a reason to hurry home every evening, someone who worried about another person's happiness and well-being. The truth was, he was going to miss Amara terribly when she found her permanent family. But he also knew that what mattered most was her long-term happiness and stability. And if the Thompsons were as wonderful as Patricia described, then maybe this story would have the happy ending that Amara deserved. As he headed to bed, Benjamin stopped by Amara's room to check on her. She was sleeping peacefully, surrounded by stuffed animals, her new book stacked neatly on the nightstand beside her bed. In sleep, she looked like any other 8-year-old girl, free from the worry and hypervigilance that still occasionally shadowed her waking hours. Tomorrow, he decided he would start preparing her for the possibility of meeting the Thompsons. It wouldn't be easy, but together they would figure out how to navigate this next step in her journey toward finding a real, permanent family. A week later, Benjamin found himself sitting across from James and Angela Thompson in a quiet corner of a family restaurant downtown, watching nervously as Amara colored in a children's menu at his side. The Thompsons had arrived 15 minutes early, which Benjamin took as a good sign, and they'd spent the time getting to know each other before Amara joined them. James Thompson was a tall, soft-spoken man in his early 40s with an easy smile and the patient demeanor Benjamin had come to associate with good teachers. He wore a simple button-down shirt and khakis, and when he talked about his students, his entire face lit up with genuine affection. Angela was shorter and more animated, with warm brown eyes and an infectious laugh. She brought a small gift for Amara, a book about a little girl who loves art, wrapped in cheerful paper. "We don't want to overwhelm her," Angela had explained to Benjamin before Amara arrived. "Patricia told us about her background, and we understand that trust doesn't come easily for children who've been through what she has." Now, as they all sat together, Benjamin watched the careful dance of a first meeting between a child and potential parents. Amara was polite but reserved, answering questions about her interests and hobbies but volunteering little additional information. The Thompsons, to their credit, didn't push. They shared stories about themselves, asked gentle questions and gave Amara space to observe and process. "I teach 3rd grade, James told Amara when she mentioned that she missed school. "And one of my favorite things is when students discover they love reading. Patricia mentioned that you're quite the bookworm." Amara nodded shyly. "I like stories about kids who go on adventures. And I like books about animals too." "Have you read any of the Junie B. Jones books?" Angela asked. "They're about a little girl who gets into all sorts of funny situations." "No, ma'am, but I'd like to," Amara said, glancing at Benjamin for reassurance. The conversation continued in this gentle vein throughout lunch. Benjamin found himself impressed by the Thompsons' approach. They didn't try to win Amara over with grand promises or overwhelming enthusiasm. Instead, they treated her like a person whose opinions and feelings mattered, asking about her preferences and listening carefully to her answers. When Amara excused herself to use the restroom, Angela turned to Benjamin with a serious expression. "She's been through so much," she said quietly. "Patricia gave us the basics, but seeing her in person, you can tell she's learned to be very careful about trusting people." "It's going to take time," Benjamin agreed. "She's an amazing kid, incredibly resilient and smart, but she's also learned that the people she loves can disappear from her life without warning." "We understand that," James said. "We've been preparing for this for years. We know that building a family through adoption isn't the same as having biological children. There's more history to navigate, more healing that needs to happen." After lunch, they walked to a nearby park where Amara could play while the adults continued talking. Benjamin watched her on the swings, pumping her legs with the determined concentration she brought to everything, and felt a familiar mix of pride and protectiveness. "Mr. Carter," Angela said, following his gaze, "Patricia mentioned that you're planning to stay involved in Amara's life even after she's placed with a permanent family. We want you to know that we think that's wonderful. Amara has clearly bonded with you, and we would never want to disrupt that relationship." Benjamin felt a wave of relief. One of his biggest fears had been that Amara's new family might see his continued involvement as interference. "That means a lot to me. I know I'm not her parent. But she's become very important to me in a very short time." "We can see that," James said. "And honestly, it makes us feel better about this whole situation. Amara is going to need all the support and love she can get as she adjusts to a new life." When it was time to leave, the Thompsons didn't push for immediate answers or commitments. They simply thanked Amara for spending time with them and told her they hoped to see her again soon. Angela gave her the wrapped book, and Amara accepted it with polite gratitude, though Benjamin could see she was overwhelmed by the attention. That evening, as they sat in Benjamin's living room, Amara carefully unwrapped the book and examined it thoughtfully. "What did you think of Mr. James and Mrs. Angela?" Benjamin asked gently. Amara was quiet for a long moment, turning the pages of her new book without really reading them. "They seem nice," she said finally. "They didn't ask too many questions or try to make me promise things. Is there anything specific you want to know about them? Do they really want a kid or do they just think they should want one?" Amara asked, and Benjamin was struck again by how perceptive she was. "What makes you ask that?" Some people want kids because they think it's what they're supposed to do, but they don't really want to deal with all the hard parts. Like when kids are sad or scared or have bad dreams. Benjamin realized that Amara was probably thinking about the family she'd briefly stayed with after her grandmother died, people who'd been willing to help in a crisis but not equipped for the long-term reality of caring for a traumatized child. From everything Patricia has told me and from spending time with them today, I think they really genuinely want to be parents, Benjamin said carefully. They've been trying to have children for years, and they've taken classes and done home studies and prepared themselves for exactly the kind of challenges you're worried about. But what if they change their minds when they find out how much trouble I am? Benjamin's heart broke a little. Amara, sweetheart, you are not trouble. You're a little girl who's been through something incredibly difficult and who's handled it with more strength and grace than most adults could manage. Anyone who gets to be your family is going to be lucky to have you. Amara looked at him skeptically. You have to say that because you're taking care of me. I'm saying it because it's true, Benjamin said firmly. And I think if you give Mr. James and Mrs. Angela a chance, you'll see that they think so too. Over the next few days, Patricia arranged several more meetings between Amara and the Thompsons. They went to a children's museum together, had dinner at the Thompsons' house, and spent an afternoon at a local park. Each time, Amara seemed a little more relaxed, a little more willing to engage in conversation. Benjamin could see that she was cautiously beginning to like them, though she was still holding back emotionally. It was James who finally found the key to reaching her during their fourth meeting. They were at the Thompsons' house, and Amara had been admiring Angela's collection of houseplants. When Angela mentioned that she'd love to start a garden in the spring, Amara had shyly admitted that she'd helped her grandmother with a small vegetable garden behind their old apartment building. Would you like to help me plan what we should plant? Angela had asked, and Amara had nodded eagerly. But it was when James sat down at the piano in their living room and began playing a gentle melody that Amara truly opened up for the first time. She'd crept closer to listen, and when he'd asked if she'd like to try playing, her eyes had lit up with genuine excitement. My grandmama had an old keyboard, she told him as he showed her where to place her fingers on the keys. She was teaching me to play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, but I never got to finish learning it. James had spent the next hour patiently teaching her the complete song, celebrating when she played it through without mistakes. Benjamin, watching from across the room, had seen Amara's face transform with joy and pride, and he'd known in that moment that this was going to work out. After that breakthrough, the transition process moved more quickly. Patricia began talking about timelines and logistics, about gradually increasing the amount of time Amara spent with the Thompsons until she was ready to move in with them permanently. That night, as Benjamin tucked Amara into bed, she surprised him with a question. If I go live with Mr. James and Mrs. Angela, will you be sad? Benjamin considered his answer carefully. I'll miss you terribly, he said honestly. But I'll also be happy because I'll know you're with people who love you and want to take care of you forever. Will you still visit me sometimes? As often as you want me to, and as often as your new parents are comfortable with, Benjamin promised. Amara nodded, then surprised him again. I think Grandmama would like them, she said quietly. She always said that good people can be found anywhere if you know how to look for them. As Benjamin turned off the light and headed toward the door, Amara's voice stopped him. Benjamin, thank you for finding them for me. And thank you for not keeping me just because you wanted to. Benjamin felt tears prick his eyes. Even at 8 years old, Amara understood that letting someone go because it was best for them was one of the truest forms of love. Thank you for trusting me enough to try, he said softly. Sleep well, sweetheart. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable rhythm as Amara spent increasing amounts of time with the Thompson family. What started as a few hours on weekends gradually expanded to overnight stays and then long weekends. Benjamin found himself both proud of how well Amara was adjusting and surprisingly emotional about the approaching transition. During one of their regular check-ins, Patricia observed the interactions between all parties with professional satisfaction. This is exactly how these transitions should work, she told Benjamin privately. Gradual, child-led, with lots of support from everyone involved. James had turned out to be a perfect match for Amara's quiet, thoughtful personality. He never pushed her to talk when she wasn't ready, but he was always available when she wanted to share something. Their shared love of reading had blossomed into a nightly tradition of reading together before bed, taking turns with chapters of longer books. He reads all the character voices differently, Amara told Benjamin excitedly after one of her stays. He makes the dragon sound really scary but not too scary, and he does this funny voice for the talking rabbit. Angela had connected with Amara through their mutual love of art and growing things. She'd set up a small art station in what would become Amara's bedroom, complete with an easel, paints, and good lighting. Together, they'd started planning the spring garden, poring over seed catalogs and drawing diagrams of where different vegetables should go. "Mrs. Angela says we can plant sunflowers along the back fence," Amara reported to Benjamin, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Really tall ones that might grow taller than me." But perhaps more importantly, Benjamin could see that the Thompsons understood the deeper aspects of caring for a child who'd experienced trauma. When Amara had a nightmare during one of her overnight stays, James had known exactly how to comfort her without making her feel embarrassed about being scared. When she'd had a moment of panic about whether there would be enough food for dinner, Angela had calmly shown her the full pantry and explained their meal planning routine. "They get it," Amara told Benjamin one evening as they made dinner together in his kitchen. "They understand that sometimes I worry about things that probably won't happen." "How does that feel?" Benjamin asked. "Safe," Amara said simply. "Like I don't have to pretend to be okay all the time." During this transition period, Benjamin also found himself developing a genuine friendship with James and Angela. They'd invited him for dinner several times, and he'd been touched by how naturally they included him in their growing family dynamic. "We know how important you are to Amara," Angela had told him during one of these dinners. "And honestly, we'd love to have your perspective as she settles in. You know her better than anyone right now." The three adults had worked together to establish routines and expectations that would help Amara feel secure. They decided that Benjamin would continue his weekly visits for the foreseeable future, that he'd be available by phone whenever Amara needed him, and that he'd play an ongoing role in major decisions about her education and activities. "It takes a village," James had said, and Benjamin had appreciated being included in Amara's village. One Saturday afternoon, about a month into the transition process, Benjamin arrived at the Thompson house for his regular visit to find Amara in the backyard with James, helping him build raised garden beds for their spring planting. She was wearing old clothes and had dirt smudged on her cheek, but she looked happier and more relaxed than Benjamin had ever seen her. "Benjamin, look," she called out when she saw him. "We're making the boxes for the vegetables. Mr. James is teaching me how to use real tools." Benjamin watched as James patiently showed Amara how to hold the drill properly, his hands covering hers to guide the motion. It was such a normal, family scene, the kind of moment that Amara had been deprived of for too long. "She's a natural," James told Benjamin. "Great attention to detail, and she follows instructions perfectly." Inside, Angela was baking cookies and preparing dinner. The house smelled like cinnamon and roasting chicken, warm and welcoming in a way that spoke of genuine family life rather than anything staged for his benefit. "How's she doing with the nightmares?" Benjamin asked Angela quietly while Amara was outside. "Better," Angela said. "Still having them occasionally, but she's starting to come to us when she wakes up scared instead of trying to handle it alone. That feels like progress." During dinner, Benjamin watched the easy interaction between Amara and her soon-to-be parents. She chattered about her day at school, where she'd recently enrolled in the local elementary school. James helped her with a math problem she'd been struggling with, and Angela listened attentively to her plans for what they should plant in their new garden beds. It struck Benjamin that this wasn't a family in the making anymore. This was simply a family. Amara belonged here in a way that was both natural and beautiful to witness. After dinner, as had become their tradition, James sat down at the piano and Amara joined him on the bench. She progressed far beyond "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," and was now working on a simple arrangement of "Amazing Grace" that James had adapted for her skill level. As her small fingers moved across the keys, Benjamin felt a complex mix of emotions. Pride in how far she'd come, gratitude for the family who'd embraced her so completely, and yes, a certain sadness about his changing role in her life. But it was the good kind of sadness, the kind that came from watching someone you love find their place in the world. "She's ready," Patricia told him later that week during one of their regular phone check-ins. "All the pieces are in place for the final transition. How are you feeling about it?" "Like it's exactly what should happen," Benjamin said honestly. "The Thompsons are incredible and Amara is thriving with them. I'm going to miss having her here full-time, but this is what's best for her." "And that," Patricia said warmly, "is exactly what makes you perfect in this role. Not everyone understands that loving a child sometimes means letting them go to where they'll be happiest. Are you following this incredible journey of love, sacrifice, and new beginnings? Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts about Benjamin's difficult but beautiful decision in the comments below. What would you do in his situation? The adoption paperwork was progressing smoothly, with a court date scheduled for the following month. In the meantime, Amara would make the final transition to living with the Thompsons full-time, though she'd continue her regular visits with Benjamin. As he prepared for this next phase, Benjamin found himself reflecting on how much his own life had changed. 6 weeks ago he'd been a lonely businessman with more money than purpose. Now he had a family of sorts, people he cared about deeply and who cared about him in return. He had Amara, who would always be special to him regardless of where she lived. And he had James and Angela, who'd become genuine friends united by their shared love for one remarkable little girl. Most importantly, he had a clearer sense of what mattered in life. It wasn't the size of his bank account or the success of his business ventures. It was connections, relationships, the ability to make a positive difference in someone else's life. Amara had given him that gift and he would be grateful for it forever. 3 weeks later, as December returned with its promise of another Christmas, Benjamin found himself in the unprecedented position of helping plan a celebration for a real family. The contrast with the previous year when he'd walked those empty streets alone was not lost on him. "We want to make this the most special Christmas Amara's ever had," Angela told him during one of their planning sessions at the Thompson house. "Not because of expensive gifts or anything like that, but because it's her first Christmas as part of a real family." They were sitting around the kitchen table, which had become the unofficial headquarters for holiday planning. Amara was at her after-school art program, giving the adults time to discuss surprise elements of the celebration. James had spread out a calendar and was coordinating schedules, while Angela consulted a notebook full of ideas she'd been collecting. "What kinds of traditions did she have with her grandmother?" James asked. "We want to honor those while also starting some new ones." Benjamin thought back to the stories Amara had shared during their early conversations. She mentioned that her grandmother always made special cookies at Christmas, cut into star shapes, and they would walk around their neighborhood looking at holiday lights. Simple things but meaningful to her. "Star cookies we can definitely do," Angela said, making a note. "And there's a neighborhood about 20 minutes from here that goes all out with Christmas decorations. We could make that our Christmas Eve tradition." "What about Christmas morning?" Benjamin asked. "How do you want to handle presents?" This was something they'd discussed before. Benjamin's instinct was to shower Amara with everything she'd never had, but the Thompsons had gently suggested a more measured approach. Too many gifts might overwhelm her or make her feel uncomfortable about accepting so much. "A few meaningful gifts," James said. "Things that show we've been paying attention to her interests. And maybe one big surprise that's something she's dreamed about but never asked for." They'd learned that Amara had always wanted a bicycle. She'd mentioned it casually once, saying that her grandmother had promised to save up for one before she got sick. It was the perfect big surprise. "I'd like to contribute to that," Benjamin said. "Not just the bike, but maybe a lesson or two so she can learn to ride safely." "That would be wonderful," Angela agreed. "She'd love having you involved in teaching her." Over the next week, their preparations intensified. Benjamin found himself surprisingly invested in getting every detail right. He helped James string lights around the house, assisted Angela with cookie decorating supplies, and secretly arranged for the bicycle to be delivered and assembled on Christmas Eve. Amara, meanwhile, was glowing with excitement about her first real Christmas celebration. She'd thrown herself into making gifts for everyone, spending hours at her art station creating personalized paintings for James, Angela, and Benjamin. The secrecy required for surprise making delighted her, and she'd recruited Angela as her co-conspirator for wrapping supplies and hiding places. "I never got to make presents for people before," she confided to Benjamin during one of his visits. "Grandmama and I didn't have money for supplies, and when I was on the street, I didn't have anyone to make things for." "What did you make for Christmas when you were with your grandmother?" Benjamin asked. "We would find pretty things on our walks, like interesting rocks or leaves that hadn't fallen apart yet, and Grandmama would help me make them into little decorations. She said the best gifts come from the heart, not from stores." Benjamin made a mental note to share this philosophy with James and Angela. It perfectly captured what they were trying to create, a Christmas focused on love and family rather than material excess. The weekend before Christmas, they decided to have a practice run of their holiday traditions. All four of them piled into James's car and drove to the neighborhood Angela had discovered, where nearly every house was decorated with elaborate light displays. Amara pressed her face to the car window as they drove slowly through the streets, her eyes wide with wonder. "Look at that one," she exclaimed, pointing to a house covered in thousands of twinkling lights. "It looks like a fairy castle." They parked and walked through a small park in the center of the neighborhood, where local residents had set up a community display complete with a light tunnel and animated reindeer. Amara held Benjamin's hand on one side and Angela's on the other, practically vibrating with excitement. "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," she whispered as they walked through the tunnel of lights. Later, back at the Thompson house, they made hot chocolate and the first batch of star cookies, using a recipe Angela had found that was similar to what Amara remembered her grandmother making. As they rolled out dough and used cookie cutters, Amara chattered happily about Christmas plans. "Are you sure it's okay that I made you a present?" she asked Benjamin for the third time. "You've already given me so much." "Amara, sweetheart, the best presents are the ones made with love," Benjamin assured her. "I can't wait to see what you've created. And you're going to be here Christmas morning, right? For the whole day. If that's what you want, and if James and Angela don't mind having me underfoot all day. We'd be honored to have you," James said warmly. "Christmas is about family, and you're definitely part of ours." That night, after Benjamin had returned to his apartment, he found himself reflecting on how dramatically his life had changed. A year ago he dreaded Christmas, seeing it as a reminder of everything he lacked. Now he was actively involved in planning a celebration that felt more meaningful than any holiday he'd experienced as an adult. His apartment, once a showcase of expensive minimalism, now had touches of Amara throughout. Her artwork decorated his refrigerator, her favorite books had a permanent place on his coffee table, and he'd even bought a small Christmas tree, something he hadn't done in years. The next few days passed in a blur of final preparations. Benjamin helped James assemble the bicycle on Christmas Eve afternoon, while Angela and Amara were out buying last-minute baking supplies. They hid it in the garage, covered with a sheet, ready for its Christmas morning debut. "She's going to lose her mind when she sees this," James said, adjusting the seat height one final time. "In the best possible way," Benjamin agreed, imagining Amara's face when she discovered her long-dreamed-of bicycle. That evening they had their official Christmas Eve celebration. They drove through the light display neighborhood again, this time as an established tradition rather than a test run. They made more star cookies, sang Christmas carols with James at the piano, and read "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" together by the fireplace. As Amara got ready for bed, she hugged each of them tightly. "This is the best Christmas Eve ever," she announced. "Thank you for making it so special." After she was asleep, the three adults finished the final preparations. They arranged presents under the tree, set out the bicycle with a large red bow, and put the finishing touches on the special Christmas breakfast Angela had planned. "Thank you," Angela said to Benjamin as they stood back to admire their work. "For everything. For finding her, for taking care of her, for helping us become a family." "Thank you for giving her the family she deserves," Benjamin replied. "And for letting me be part of it." As he drove home that night, Benjamin felt a contentment he hadn't experienced in years. Tomorrow would bring Amara's first real Christmas morning, surrounded by people who loved her unconditionally. It would mark the official beginning of her new life as a permanent member of the Thompson family. And while his role was evolving from guardian to family friend, Benjamin knew that the love they'd built together would last forever. Christmas morning couldn't come soon enough. Christmas morning dawned bright and crisp, with fresh snow covering the ground like nature's own gift wrapping. Benjamin arrived at the Thompson house early, carrying a thermos of coffee and his contribution to Christmas breakfast. Homemade cinnamon rolls that he'd gotten up at 5 a.m. to prepare. "Someone's excited," Angela teased as she let him in the front door. "It's barely 7 o'clock. "I couldn't sleep," Benjamin admitted, and it was true. He'd been as excited as any child about this Christmas morning, probably more excited than he'd been about anything in years. James emerged from the kitchen, already dressed and holding a cup of coffee. "Amara's still sleeping, but I don't think that's going to last much longer. I heard her stirring about 20 minutes ago." They didn't have to wait long. At exactly 7:23 a.m., they heard the soft patter of bare feet on hardwood floors, followed by a small gasp from the living room. "Oh my goodness," came Amara's voice filled with wonder. "Oh my goodness, oh my goodness." They found her standing in the doorway of the living room, taking in the scene before her. The tree was surrounded by carefully wrapped presents, but it was the bicycle, gleaming red with a huge silver bow, that had captured her attention completely. Is that for me?" she whispered as if speaking too loudly might make it disappear. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," Angela said, wrapping an arm around Amara's shoulders. Amara looked up at each of them in turn, her eyes bright with tears of joy. "A real bicycle?" "My own bicycle." "Your very own," James confirmed. "Benjamin helped pick it out. He thought you might like the color." Amara launched herself at Benjamin, wrapping her arms around his waist in a hug so fierce it nearly knocked him off balance. Thank you," she mumbled into his shirt. I can't believe it's real. There's more, Angela said gently. Why don't you check what else is under the tree? The next hour was pure magic. Amara opened each present with careful reverence, taking time to admire and thank everyone before moving on to the next. She received art supplies, books, a beautiful winter coat, and board games the whole family could enjoy together. But it was the smaller, more personal gifts that seemed to mean the most to her. James had framed one of her paintings and hung it in his study. So I can see your artwork every day when I'm grading papers, he explained. Angela had created a photo album documenting Amara's transition into their family, starting with pictures from their first meeting and including shots of her helping with the garden beds, learning piano, and decorating Christmas cookies. But it was Benjamin's gift that made her cry happy tears. He'd had a locket made, with a photo of Amara and her grandmother on one side and a photo of her new family on the other. So you can always carry both families with you, he said as he helped her put it on. The family that loved you first and the family that loves you now. Amara touched the locket gently, then looked up at Benjamin with an expression of pure gratitude. It's perfect, she whispered. When it came time for Amara to give her gifts, she was practically bouncing with excitement. She'd made each of them a painting, but they weren't just random artwork. She'd painted specific memories from their time together. For James, she'd painted the two of them at the piano, capturing the moment he'd first taught her Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. For Angela, she'd painted them in the garden, surrounded by the sunflowers they planned to plant in the spring. And for Benjamin, she'd painted the scene from that first night when he'd found her behind the diner, but she'd added something that hadn't been there in reality, a bright star shining down on them both. Because you were like my star that night, she explained as Benjamin studied the painting with tears in his eyes. You showed me the way to my new family. Benjamin had to excuse himself to the bathroom for a moment to compose himself. When he returned, Angela was setting out their Christmas breakfast, and the smell of cinnamon rolls, scrambled eggs, and fresh fruit filled the house. Can we take a picture before we eat? Amara asked. I want to remember exactly how this looked. They spent the rest of the morning in the kind of relaxed, joyful atmosphere that Benjamin had dreamed of but never experienced. They played board games, read stories, and took turns trying to teach Amara to ride her new bicycle in the driveway. She was a quick learner, and by afternoon she was pedaling confidently up and down the sidewalk with James jogging alongside her. Look at me, she called out to Benjamin and Angela, who were watching from the front porch. I'm really riding. For Christmas dinner, Angela had prepared a feast that somehow managed to be both elegant and comfortable. They used the good china and lit candles, but the conversation was filled with laughter and the kind of easy teasing that marked a real family. During dessert, Benjamin made an announcement that he'd been planning for weeks. I have something to tell you all, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket for an envelope. Amara, I've set up something called a trust fund for you. It's money that will pay for your college education and anything else you might need as you grow up. But more than that, I've also established the Amara Johnson Foundation. Amara looked confused. What's that? It's an organization that will help other children who are in situations like you were. Kids who are homeless or in need of families. We're going to make sure no child has to spend Christmas Eve digging through garbage for food. Amara's eyes went wide. You're going to help other kids like me? We're going to help them, Benjamin corrected gently. This foundation will be something we all work on together. When you're older, if you want to, you can help decide how we use the money to help children. James and Angela exchanged a meaningful look. That's incredible, Benjamin, Angela said. What a beautiful way to honor what brought us all together. And, Benjamin continued, I've also talked to a lawyer about something else. James, Angela, I'd like to make sure that if anything ever happens to you, Amara could come back to live with me. Only if she wants to, of course, and only if the courts approve. But I want her to know that she'll always have a backup plan, always have someone looking out for her. The room went quiet for a moment, and Benjamin worried that he'd overstepped. But then Amara got up from her chair and came around the table to hug him. So I'll never be alone again? She asked quietly. Never, Benjamin promised, hugging her back. You have a whole family now, and we're all going to take care of each other. Later that evening, after they'd cleaned up from dinner and played more games by the fireplace, Benjamin prepared to head home. As he put on his coat, Amara appeared beside him with something in her hands. I have one more present for you, she said shyly. I made it this morning before everyone woke up. She handed him a small hand-drawn Christmas card. On the front, she'd drawn a picture of all four of them standing together in front of a Christmas tree. Inside, in her careful 8-year-old handwriting, she'd written, Thank you for saving my life and giving me a family. Love, your daughter of the heart, Amara. Benjamin felt his throat close up completely. Daughter of the heart, he repeated softly. Is that okay? Amara asked, suddenly uncertain. I know you're not my real dad, but you feel like family to me. Benjamin knelt down so he was at her eye level. That's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever called me, he said honestly. And you'll always be my daughter of the heart, no matter what. As he drove home that night, Benjamin reflected on the perfect symmetry of it all. Exactly 1 year ago he'd been walking alone through empty streets, feeling like his life had no real meaning or purpose. Tonight he was driving home from the most meaningful Christmas of his life, knowing that he'd helped create something beautiful and lasting. His phone buzzed with a text from Angela. Thank you for making this the most perfect Christmas ever. Amara is already planning what we should plant in the garden for you to see in the spring. Benjamin smiled and typed back, thank you for letting me be part of your family. See you all soon. At a red light, he looked at Amara's Christmas card again, studying her drawing of their little family. In the picture they were all holding hands, all smiling, all clearly belonging together. It was exactly what Christmas was supposed to be about. Love, family, and the magic of new beginnings. Tomorrow would bring the official adoption hearing, where Amara would legally become Amara Thompson. But tonight, Benjamin knew that the real adoption had already taken place. They'd all chosen each other, all committed to being family regardless of what any piece of paper said. It had been, without question, the most perfect Christmas any of them had ever experienced. January brought new routines and the official finalization of Amara's adoption. The courthouse ceremony was simple but deeply moving, with Judge Harrison making the legal pronouncement that transformed Amara Johnson into Amara Thompson. Benjamin sat in the front row, watching as his daughter of the heart officially became part of her forever family. Do you promise to love and care for Amara as your own daughter? Judge Harrison asked James and Angela. We do, they said in unison, and Benjamin saw tears of joy in all their eyes. After the ceremony, they celebrated with lunch at Amara's favorite restaurant, the same diner where Benjamin had first taken her on that snowy Christmas Eve. Dolores, the kind waitress who had shown them such warmth that first night, fussed over Amara and insisted that lunch was on the house. Look how much you've grown, Dolores said, admiring Amara's new winter coat and the confident way she carried herself. And look how happy you are. I have a real family now, Amara told her proudly. And Mr. Benjamin is still my special friend who visits every week. The transition into regular family life had gone more smoothly than anyone had dared hope. Amara had settled into her new school with enthusiasm, quickly making friends and impressing her teachers with her intelligence and creativity. Her third-grade teacher, Mrs. Patterson, had called James after the first week to rave about Amara's reading level and artistic abilities. She's clearly very bright, Mrs. Patterson had said, but more than that, she has this resilience and maturity that's remarkable for her age. She's going to do wonderful things. At home, Amara had claimed her space with the confidence of a child who finally felt secure. Her bedroom was filled with books, art supplies, and the stuffed animals Benjamin had bought her that first week. The walls were covered with her artwork, and Angela had framed several of her best pieces to display throughout the house. The piano lessons with James had become a daily highlight. Amara was progressing rapidly, and James had started teaching her simple classical pieces alongside the popular songs she loved. Their evening practice sessions had become a cherished routine, with Angela and sometimes Benjamin listening from the kitchen while they prepared dinner or cleaned up. She has real musical talent, James told Benjamin during one of his weekly visits. Her teacher thinks she might want to consider more formal lessons as she gets older. Whatever she wants to pursue we'll support, Benjamin said, and he meant it. The trust fund he'd established would ensure that Amara never had to limit her dreams because of financial constraints. The garden project had become a family obsession as winter slowly gave way to spring. Amara and Angela spent hours poring over seed catalogs and planning the layout of their vegetable garden. They decided on tomatoes, peppers, carrots, and herbs, plus the sunflowers that Amara was most excited about. Benjamin, you have to come see our garden when the sunflowers are tall, Amara told him during one of their weekly dinner visits. Angela says they might grow to be 8 feet tall. That's taller than anybody in our family. I wouldn't miss it, Benjamin promised, and he could already picture himself standing in their backyard in late summer, watching Amara show off the flowers she'd helped grow from seeds. The Amara Johnson Foundation had officially launched in March, with Benjamin, James, and Angela serving as the initial board of directors. They'd started small, partnering with local homeless shelters to provide emergency care packages for children. Each package contained warm clothes, basic toiletries, books, and small toys, along with information about resources for families in crisis. "I want to help pack the boxes," Amara had insisted when she learned about the foundation's first project. "I know what kids like me need." Benjamin had been moved to watch her carefully select books and toys for the care packages, remembering what it felt like to be scared and alone and making sure other children would have small comforts in difficult times. But it was the small, everyday moments that meant the most to Benjamin. The way Amara ran to hug him when he arrived for his weekly visits. The artwork she created especially for him, always signed "Love, Amara," in her careful handwriting. The phone calls when she wanted to share exciting news from school or ask his opinion about something important. "Benjamin," she called him one evening in February, "I got picked to be in the school talent show. I'm going to play piano. Will you come watch me?" "I wouldn't miss it for anything," Benjamin had assured her, and he'd sat in the front row 2 weeks later, beaming with pride as Amara played Amazing Grace flawlessly for an audience of parents and classmates. One particularly meaningful moment came in late March, when Amara asked Benjamin to come with her to visit her grandmother's grave. It was something she'd wanted to do since moving in with the Thompsons, but she'd needed time to build up the courage. They brought fresh flowers and a small framed photo of Amara with her new family. As they stood beside the simple headstone, Amara talked to her grandmother in a quiet voice, telling her about school and friends and her new parents who loved her. "I think you would like them, Grandmama," she said softly. "They take good care of me just like you did. And Benjamin is still looking out for me too, just like he promised." Benjamin found himself wiping away tears as he listened to Amara's one-sided conversation with the woman who had loved her first and best. When she was finished, she turned to him with a peaceful expression. "I'm ready to go home now," she said, and Benjamin knew she meant the Thompson house, the place where she truly belonged. As spring progressed, Benjamin noticed changes in himself as well. His work, while still successful, no longer consumed his entire identity. He'd started leaving the office earlier to attend Amara's school events or help with family projects. He'd begun dating again, something he hadn't done in years, though he was careful to only get involved with people who understood and respected his commitment to Amara. "She's changed you," his assistant had observed one day when he left early to attend Amara's art show at school. In the best possible way. The weekly family dinners had become the highlight of Benjamin's week. Sometimes they cooked together, sometimes they ordered takeout, but they always spent the evening talking, playing games, or working on projects together. Benjamin had his own chair at their kitchen table, his own coffee mug in their cabinet, and his own place in their family photo albums. "You know what my favorite part of the week is?" Amara asked him one evening as they worked together on a jigsaw puzzle. "What's that, sweetheart?" "Tuesday nights when you come for dinner. It feels like our whole family is together." Benjamin squeezed her hand gently. "That's my favorite part of the week too." As April arrived and Amara began preparing for her first Mother's Day and Father's Day with the Thompsons, Benjamin found himself reflecting on the miracle of how they'd all found each other. A chance encounter on a snowy Christmas Eve had led to the formation of an unconventional but deeply loving family. Amara was thriving in ways that went beyond just being safe and fed. She was confident, creative, and filled with the kind of joy that came from knowing she was genuinely loved and wanted. James and Angela had become the parents they'd always dreamed of being, their house filled with the laughter and energy that only a child could bring. And Benjamin had discovered a purpose and meaning in life that he'd never known he was missing. But their story was far from over. As Benjamin watched Amara blow out the candles on her 9th birthday cake, surrounded by her new family and the friends she'd made at school, he knew that this was just the beginning of their adventure together. "Make a wish, sweetheart," Angela encouraged. Amara closed her eyes tight, made her wish, and blew out all 9 candles in one breath. When she opened her eyes, she looked directly at Benjamin. "I wish that our family would always be together," she announced. "All of us, forever and ever." "That's a wish that's definitely going to come true," Benjamin promised, and he meant it with all his heart. It was a crisp October morning, exactly 10 months after Amara's adoption, when Benjamin's phone rang with the call that would test everything they'd built together. He was in his office reviewing quarterly reports, when James's panicked voice came through the speaker. "Benjamin, we need you at Roosevelt Elementary immediately. Amara is missing." The words hit Benjamin like a physical blow. "What do you mean missing?" They were on a field trip to the Natural History Museum downtown. When they did the head count to get back on the bus, she wasn't there. "The teachers have been looking for an hour. The police are on their way." Benjamin was already grabbing his keys and heading for the elevator. "I'll be right there." "Have you called Angela?" "She's already en route from the hospital." "Benjamin, where could she have gone? This isn't like her." She follows rules, she stays with groups. Something must have happened. During the 20-minute drive to the museum, Benjamin's mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Amara was responsible and cautious by nature. She wouldn't have wandered off without reason. Had someone taken her? Had she gotten scared about something and run? Had she been hurt and was unable to call for help? He found James and Angela standing with 2 police officers and several frantic-looking teachers in the museum's main lobby. Angela was crying and James was pacing back and forth, running his hands through his hair. "Any word?" Benjamin asked immediately. "Nothing," Angela said, her voice breaking. "They've searched the entire museum twice. She's not here." Officer Maria Santos, a kind-faced woman who had dealt with missing children cases before, approached Benjamin. "Are you the family friend they mentioned?" "I'm her. I'm very close to the family," Benjamin said. "Officer, what are you doing to find her?" "We've issued an Amber Alert, we have units searching the surrounding area, and we're reviewing all the museum's security footage. But I need to ask you some questions about Amara's state of mind lately. Has she seemed upset about anything? Has there been any change in her behavior?" Benjamin, James, and Angela looked at each other. "She's been happy," James said. "Really genuinely happy. This is completely out of character for her." "She was excited about the field trip," Angela added. "She's been talking about seeing the dinosaur exhibit for weeks." Officer Santos nodded, making notes. "Sometimes children who've experienced trauma, even children who seem to be doing well, can have unexpected triggers. Is there anywhere she might go if she was feeling scared or overwhelmed? Somewhere that represents safety to her?" Benjamin felt a sudden, cold realization wash over him. "I think I know where she might be." 20 minutes later, Benjamin's car pulled up behind the old brick building that housed Murphy's Corner store. His heart was pounding as he got out and walked around to the alley behind the building, the same alley where he'd found Amara digging through garbage on that snowy Christmas Eve nearly a year ago. And there she was. Amara was sitting beside the dumpster, but not the way she'd been that first night. She wasn't searching for food or trying to survive. She was simply sitting cross-legged on the clean pavement, holding a small bouquet of flowers. She looked up when she heard his footsteps and her face was streaked with tears. "Amara," Benjamin said gently, approaching slowly. "Sweetheart, everyone is very worried about you. Are you okay?" She nodded but didn't stand up. "I'm not hurt or anything. I needed to come here." Benjamin sat down on the pavement beside her, not caring about his expensive suit. "Can you tell me why?" "Today is the anniversary," Amara said quietly. "The day Grandmama died. I remembered this morning when I woke up and I couldn't stop thinking about it all day. When we were at the museum, I kept thinking about how she never got to see me in a real family, never got to know that I was okay." Benjamin's heart broke for her. In all their careful attention to helping her adjust to her new life, they'd overlooked the significance of this painful anniversary. "So you came here to remember her?" Amara nodded, looking down at the flowers in her lap. "I bought these at the gift shop at the museum. I told Mrs. Peterson I needed to use the bathroom, but I went outside instead and got a taxi. I know I wasn't supposed to, but I had to come here." "Why here, sweetheart? Your grandmother isn't buried here." "This is where you found me," Amara said simply. "This is where my new life started. I wanted to bring flowers here and tell Grandmama that I'm okay, that I found my family, that she doesn't have to worry about me anymore." Benjamin felt tears spring to his eyes. Even in her grief, even in her need to commemorate this painful anniversary, Amara had come to the place that represented hope and new beginnings rather than despair. "Amara, I understand why you needed to do this," Benjamin said carefully. "But you scared everyone who loves you. James and Angela are frantic. The police are looking for you. We thought something terrible had happened." "I'm sorry," she said, and he could see that she genuinely was. "I didn't think about that. I just needed to be here for a little while." Benjamin pulled out his phone and called James. "I found her. She's safe. We're behind Murphy's Corner store. Yes, that place. We'll explain everything when we get back." After he hung up, Benjamin looked at Amara seriously. "We need to talk about this, sweetheart. About how you handled your feelings today. There are better ways to deal with sad anniversaries than disappearing and scaring everyone." "I know," Amara said quietly. "I just missed her so much today and I didn't know how to tell anyone. James and Angela are so happy to be my parents, and you're always so glad that I found my family. I didn't want to make anyone sad by talking about missing Grandmama." Benjamin understood immediately. In their joy over Amara's successful transition, They'd inadvertently made her feel like she couldn't grieve for what she'd lost. "Oh, sweetheart," he said, pulling her into a gentle hug. "You never have to hide your feelings about your grandmother from us. We want you to remember her and miss her and talk about her whenever you need to. Loving your new family doesn't mean you have to stop loving the people who came before." They sat together in comfortable silence for a few minutes, with Amara leaning against Benjamin's shoulder. Finally she looked up at him. "Can we put the flowers here before we go back? I want to finish what I came to do." "Of course." Together they placed the small bouquet beside the dumpster. Amara closed her eyes and whispered something too quiet for Benjamin to hear, a private message to the grandmother who had loved her first and best. "Okay," she said finally. "I'm ready to go home now." The reunion at the museum was emotional and overwhelming. Angela swept Amara into a fierce hug, crying with relief. James knelt down to her level and gently asked if she was hurt, if anyone had bothered her, if she needed anything. The police officers were kind but firm about the importance of staying with adult supervision, and Amara apologized profusely to her teachers and classmates. That evening, all four of them sat around the Thompson family kitchen table, talking about the day's events with the honesty and openness that had become their family's foundation. "I'm sorry I scared everyone," Amara said again. "I won't leave like that again without telling someone where I'm going." "We're just glad you're safe," Angela said. "But Amara, honey, we need you to understand that you can always talk to us about missing your grandmother. She was the most important person in your life for a long time, and it's perfectly normal to have sad days about losing her. We could make today a special Remembrance Day every year," James suggested. "A day when we specifically honor your grandmother's memory and talk about how much she meant to you. And maybe," Benjamin added, "we could visit her grave together on this day every year. Take flowers there instead of to the alley." Amara's face brightened for the first time all day. "Could we really do that?" "Of course," Angela said. "She's part of your story, which makes her part of our family story too." As the evening wound down and they prepared for bed, Amara pulled Benjamin aside for a private conversation. "Benjamin," she said quietly, "when I was sitting in that alley today, I realized something." "What's that, sweetheart?" "A year ago I was there because I didn't have anywhere else to go. I was scared and cold and alone. But today when I went back I knew I had a home to return to. I knew I had people who would come looking for me because they loved me. That made all the difference." Benjamin felt his throat tighten with emotion. "You're absolutely right. And you'll always have people looking out for you no matter what." "I know," Amara said with the confident smile of a child who finally, completely understood what it meant to be truly loved. "I'm not alone anymore. I have a whole family." 3 months later, as they gathered around the Christmas tree for Amara's second Christmas with the Thompson family, Benjamin reflected on how much they'd all grown over the past year. They'd weathered their first real crisis as a family, and it had only made them stronger. They'd learned that love wasn't just about the good times, but about supporting each other through difficult moments and painful memories. Amara had started seeing a counselor who specialized in childhood grief, and she'd learned healthy ways to process her feelings about loss while still embracing her new life. The anniversary of her grandmother's death had become an annual day of remembrance, with visits to the cemetery and stories about the woman who had shaped Amara's early years. The Amara Johnson Foundation had grown as well, now helping dozens of homeless children throughout the city. Amara had become its youngest volunteer, helping to pack care packages and even speaking at fundraising events about the importance of helping children in crisis. "Every child deserves to have someone who believes in them," she'd said at the foundation's annual dinner, speaking with a confidence that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. "I was lucky enough to find not just one person, but a whole family who believes in me." As Benjamin watched Amara help James and Angela prepare Christmas breakfast, he marveled at the transformation in all their lives. This little girl who had once been digging through garbage for food scraps was now a confident, joyful child surrounded by people who adored her. James and Angela had become the devoted parents they'd always dreamed of being. And Benjamin had discovered that the most meaningful success in life wasn't measured in dollars or business achievements, but in the love shared within a family. "Benjamin," Amara called from the kitchen, "come help us make the star cookies. I want to teach you Grandmama's technique." As he joined his chosen family in the warm, flower-dusted kitchen, Benjamin smiled at the beautiful symmetry of it all. 2 years ago, he'd been a lonely man walking empty streets on Christmas Eve. Now he was part of something precious and permanent, a family bound not by blood but by choice, love, and the kind of miracle that happens when people open their hearts to each other. It had been, without question, the most perfect Christmas miracle any of them could have imagined.